All right, I am live, I think, I hope. I am logging in just a little bit early, but if you are here, then do me a favor and let me know in the chat box so that I know it's working. I'm gonna sit here for a minute and see when people start commenting. Make sure that this is working. So all right. It looks like it's working here, so I think I'm gonna hang on tight for a little bit and wait and see who can join. Let me see. I see myself. Let me see. Oh, there's Joanna. All right. Hi, Joanna. There we go. That worked. Thank you for being here. I do know some people who are planning on coming, so I'm going to hang tight. Hi, Carrie. Yay. And give it a few minutes to let some people come on in and join. How's everybody doing? I've got a kitty cat in my lap. Everybody say hi, Nugget. Here's Nugget. This is my cat who eats furniture, which is so much fun. Let's see who all is coming. I'm getting text, so I do know we'll have people here. Yes, he's a sweet kitty. Do you have pets, Carrie? I have a bird, 2 cats, a rabbit. Hello, Judith. Thank you for joining us. We're just kind of chatting. Well, I'm sitting here kind of chatting on my own. Smoky. I wish you could post pictures so that we could see. To wait a few minutes to give people some time to join before we start chatting on Meter. I'm not going to wait too terribly long. But we'll give it a few minutes. For those people who have joined and don't know me as well or join as we're talking, my name is Shannon Stocker. I write a lot of different styles, a lot of different genres. I am a picture book lover through and through. I write for Chicken Soup for the Soul. I am almost finished with my memoir, and I am currently developing characters and doing a beat sheet for a middle grade, which is kind of going to be my next big venture. Hi, Andrea. So glad to have you. My debut picture book, Can You Save the Day, is written in verse. So I love meter, I love rhyme, I love wordplay, I love lyrical, poetic devices. But my second book, my second picture book is called Listen, and it is the story of Evelyn Glennie, who is the first person to ever have made a full-time career as a solo percussionist. And she has won 2 Grammy Awards, and she's been knighted by the Queen of England. and she is deaf. And that book comes out from Dial in 2022. And although that one doesn't rhyme, it is a lyrical picture book. And so, hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us. So I wanted to get everybody together and talk a little bit about meter, because it's something that typically people, when they think of meter, they think of how meter is used in rhyming picture books. And this isn't just about rhyme, and it's not just about what a picture book that is written in verse. Meter is really important in any lyrical manuscript. So yes, certainly poetry, it's important. And yes, certainly if you're writing in verse, it's important. But I would also argue that meter is important to understand if you want to write lyrically in prose as well. So without further ado, it is 3:05. So I am going to go ahead and pop over to my PowerPoint on Meter Matters. And thanks again. It's so nice to have everybody. Hi, Rana from LA. It's nice to have everybody here. I am talking about meter, and again, why meter matters, why it is important. Let me come over here and make sure I know how to switch. I do. So today, the primary things that we're going to be talking about are what is meter, why does it matter? Hi, Lauren. What are the hard rules of meter, the rules that cannot be broken? Because as with most style of writing, rules are made to be broken. They can be broken, some more easily than others. And what are the different types of meter? What is meter? Meter is a stressed and unstressed syllabic pattern in a verse or within lines of a poem. This is the definition as defined by literarydevices.net. Stressed syllables tend to be longer and unstressed shorter. In simple language, meter is a poetic device that serves as a linguistic sound pattern for the verses as it gives poetry a rhythmical and melodious sound. So again, they are defining meter as something that lies within verse, within poetry. I would argue that it is more important than that. I would argue that meter matters in prose because although you may not have the exact same pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables throughout a line or repeating from line to line or throughout verses in a stanza, you can see cat hair flying around all in front of me. I have a cat in my lap. It is still important for that musicality. If you want to write lyrically, then the placement of the unstressed and stressed syllables matters. Hi, Manju. It's so nice to have you here. Thanks for joining. Oh, I'm so excited to see so many people I know. This is a quote that I love, which I think it shows beautifully how meter can matter in something as simple as just a quote. Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. The glint of light on broken glass. That's a beautiful iambic tetrameter, glint of light on broken glass. And I'm willing, part of what we're talking about today, the majority, the bulk of this conversation is about what makes something iambic versus some other type of meter. Tetrameter simply refers to the number of feet that you have in that line. And we'll go on and we'll explain more about that in just a second here. So why? Why meter? Why does it matter? First of all, it is musical. The musicality of meter really, in my opinion, makes it the backbone of poetic or lyrical writing. Those regular sound patterns that are so soothing to your ears, that make a manuscript so much fun to read and for a child to hear, that make it easier to memorize. Those are so, that is where you get meter from. That is the backbone of poetic writing. So that meter makes the manuscript more lyrical and more memorable when you are reading it or hearing it read. Which brings us also to rereadability. Meter creates a source of predictability. Your reader comes to expect that certain sounds are going to create a certain flow, and that pattern happens. And when you deliver on that expectation, the payoff is rereadability. So what are the hard rules and what are the soft rules of the metric road? You can drop an unstressed beat. And again, we're going to talk about this and we're going to use hard examples. These 4 points are really very important to understanding where it's okay to break meter and where you can't. And then, of course, I'm going to show you examples with authors who break these rules that I'm telling you that you shouldn't break. You can drop an unstressed beat. You cannot and should not drop a stressed beat. You can add an unstressed beat, but you cannot or should not add a stressed beat. So obviously the similarity there between the cans is that you can mess with the unstressed syllables, have a few extra, take a couple out here and there, but if you do it too often, then again, you're breaking up that predictability of pattern, and you're gonna wind up losing your reader, just like I just lost my cat. So this is a big one. Meter is not about syllables. People think meter is about syllables all the time. When people do scansion, then they're constantly talking about syllables and trying to make sure that you have the right number of syllables. It is not about syllables. It is about beats, and it is about understanding feet. And we're going to talk a lot about that because a foot is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables that make up a metric unit. And the number of those metric units or feet within a phrase gives you that other clause that I told you about earlier, tetrameter, for example. And again, we'll talk more about that in a minute, but for right now, just think about that metric unit is called a foot. And there are 5 different types of meter. 2 that we're going to focus on because 2 are really used more often in picture books. The other 3 are far less common, sometimes never used in picture books in any that I've really been able to find anyway. But we're going to talk about all of them so that you know what they are, so that you can recognize them when they happen, because you will find them in poetry, all 5 of them in poetry. The first one is iambic meter, and that foot that we're talking about is called an iamb, and that foot in an iambic meter is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. So it sounds like this. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. I just gave you 4 feet. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And when you have 4 feet, that's called tetrameter. So if each foot is comprised of ba-dum and iamb, and you've got 4 of them, then you have iambic tetrameter. If you have ba-dum, 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 you have iambic trimeter. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum gives you iambic pentameter. And you have hexameter and septameter and octameter and so forth. So that is, I think, the easiest way to understand when you hear somebody talking about somebody writing in iambic pentameter, which you'll hear pretty frequently because it's a common form of meter to be used. You have an understanding as to what those words mean. Trochaic meter involves trochees. That's the name of the foot. A foot is a trochee, and that is a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. So you have bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. So it's the exact opposite of iambic. Spondaic meter, like trochaic meter, is not used very often in picture books at all. It's actually not a form of meter that you will find throughout an entire poem. It's a type of meter that is used in a very specific point in poems in order to really emphasize what is happening in that poem. And I will give an example of that. But again, it's not something that you'll see as much in picture books. But it is, the foot is called a spondee, and it's comprised of 2 stressed syllables in a row. The 4th type of meter is anapestic, and this is the other one that is commonly used in picture books. And it is comprised, the foot is called an anapest. And that anapest is comprised of an unstressed syllable, an unstressed syllable, and a stressed syllable. So it sounds like this. Ba-da-bump, 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 ba-da-bump. And you hear that a lot. And I have some great examples. It's actually one of my favorite meters. I think it's a lot of fun to write in. And then finally, you have dactylic meter. And again, this is one that we aren't gonna focus a lot on, particularly about dactylic rhythms, because those are most often found in classical Greek and Latin poetry. The English language doesn't really lend itself to translating to dactylic meters very well. There are a few words that are considered dactylic, and the dactyl foot is comprised of 2 stressed syllables by an unstressed. And a few examples of words that are considered to be dactylic in the English language would be mockingbird is a pretty good example. Partially and casual. But when I start thinking about words like partially, the argument can also be made that in the English language, when you use that word in a sentence, it could actually be attributed to the iambic meter as well. I am going partially to Florida. So you can hear how partially that secondary stress can be considered iambic, but it's real tricky and it's controversial. Not everybody would agree with me on that. So for the most part, we're going to stick with really clear-cut examples right now. And anytime you come across a word like that that's not clear-cut, it's probably best, if you're writing picture books at least, to just completely avoid that word and find another word. If you find words that people pronounce differently, perhaps, like every, if you're trying to make it every, you probably should just avoid using words like that completely. All right, moving on. I think we're going to move on. There we go, iambic meter. So now we're going to move into some examples, and as we do this, I want you to think of a sentence that you hear as iambic and type it for me in the chat box. And we'll talk about whether that's iambic, what type of iambic meter that is, if it breaks a rule, if it follows the rules perfectly, et cetera, et cetera. So if you've got one while I'm talking anytime, go ahead and type it on in. So iambic meter, unstressed stress. This is what I did in Can You Save the Day? Oh, there it is. There is a part of the book where I write and follow the rules. The letter A sat by a frog and chatted with a duck and dog. And you can hear the beats. The letter A sat by a frog and chatted with a duck and dog. Now, it can be argued that I broke that because if you say sat by a frog, that could be read as anapestic. So it is, like I said, it's one of those things that is not always the most objective, but it is definitely something that is worth being able to dissect so that you understand if you're breaking something, why you're breaking it, or why you're making a perfect example. The line that I used for breaking the rules was, and the frog, poor thing, he couldn't croak, he could only croak, that woeful bloke. Can anybody hear what I did that broke that in an acceptable way, that broke the iambic meter in an acceptable way? Go ahead and post if you did. I'm giving it a minute. Drum roll. I'll give it to you this time. Lauren Manju, you're my rhymer there. I know that you hear it. I added a couple of unstressed syllables. And the frog, poor thing. And then I took one away, poor thing. No, I didn't. Poor thing, he couldn't croak. He could own. So there I added an extra unstressed syllable. Only croak, that woeful bloke. So I added a couple of unstressed syllables there. But it's okay because I kept the number of stressed syllables. And because of that, my meter didn't break. So my example number 2 here for unstressed and stressed. This is, I love this book. Good Night Construction Site by Sherry Dusky Rinker. I loved this book before I got to know Sherry, and it's a really well-written book, and it's a fun book, and it's a clever one, and my kids loved it. Where does it follow the rules? The sun has set, the work is done, it's time for trucks to end their fun. Very clear. Iambic meter. The sun has set, the work is done, it's time for trucks to end their fun. So it is a tetrameter, iambic tetrameter. Where does it break the rules? Working hard to help his team, and that should not be a period after crane, that's just an error on my part. Crane truck raises one last beam. Can anybody hear where that breaks the meter? Jump in if you can. I think my daughter's about to come in here and join us. No one? Okay. This is a very common place to break the meter. In the very, very first foot, authors will often drop the unstressed syllables before an iamb or before an anapest. So you start, even though they're starting, Sherry started the sentence on a stressed syllable, working hard to help. It's still iambic, to help his team. And then, oh, there, Jennifer and Rana. Crane truck raises is okay. Raises one last beam. It's still okay. It's dropping the unstressed syllable before work. So listen for that on the next slide because you'll hear it again. And crane truck, Carrie, you're right. Crane truck actually is more of a spondy because it has two stressed syllables. So that is another place where you can argue that she broke the meter there. Crane truck. And she was not emphasizing crane. Yes. So she was saying his team, crane truck, which is forcing a meter. So it's breaking the meter there. It's more crane truck raises one last beam. So truck normally would get an emphasis, but because of the way she's written the sentence, she's forcing you not to emphasize it, which is a breaking of the rule. Iambic meter number 3. All right, this is another one I love. I love Deborah Underwood. She's so fun, and her books are awesome. Interstellar Cinderella. She has a sentence in here where she starts off saying, and actually what I've done is I've just taken the very first spread because half of the first spread follows the rules and the other half breaks the rules. So I'm actually going to read this in the reverse order. She writes, and I'm going to open it up too. I love these illustrations. They're so cute. You see it there? There it is. Once upon a planetoid, amid her tools and sprockets, a girl named Cinderella dreamed of fixing fancy rockets. So if you hear that second half of that sentence, a girl named Cinderella dreamed of fixing fancy rockets. Very, very, very clear meter there, a clear iambic meter. And I don't know if you can hear, but it's long. There are a lot of feet in that sentence. A girl named Cinderella dreamed of fixing fancy rockets. That's actually got 7 iambs in it. So that's iambic septameter. But she breaks the rules in the very, very beginning. Once upon a planetoid amid her tools and sprockets. Can you hear where she breaks it? It's the same as the last author. Any guesses? Right at the very beginning of the sentence. There is no unstressed beat. She starts with a stressed beat. So even though an iamb is unstressed, stressed, she starts. Planetoid, you would think planetoid, that's a word that could be used in ANAPESTIC meter, interestingly enough. A planetoid went to the moon, for example. That doesn't make any sense, but it would be anapestic. You can hear how that word could work in an anapestic meter, but she's made it work for her iambic meter. Once upon a planetoid amid her tools and sprockets. Planetoid, actually the heaviest stress is on the first syllable, but the second heaviest stress is on the third syllable, and that's why it works for iambic meter. So it's certainly very, very tricky. Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I know that that can get kind of sticky. If you do, feel free to write. I'm keeping my eye on the chat boxes there. But she definitely breaks the foot by not using an unstressed syllable to start her very first iamb. All right. Did anybody think of a sentence that is iambic, or a phrase? It can just be, it's nice to have you here. That's an iambic phrase. I'm glad that you could come. I want to see if people are following along with what I'm saying. I want to make sure I didn't lose anybody here. So I'm going to give you a minute to go ahead and, while I try not to scratch my tick bite, to go ahead and write something down so we can look at it. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Perfect. I wandered lonely as a cloud. That's beautiful iambic tetrameter. Thank you, Manju. Hi, Dee. Rhyme is hard. I agree, because there's so many breaking of rules. So many times when it's okay to break rules, or you can get away with breaking rules. And so when people say, your meter needs to be perfect and your rhyme needs to be perfect. Perfect is subjective, so it's tough. Mary had a little lamb, perfect. And in that example, Carrie, you've done exactly what the other authors have done and what I did in my book, which is drop that very first, Mary had a little lamb. It's not, it's actually iambic because it ends on that stressed syllable. It's unstressed stress. You've just broken the rule in a way that's acceptable because you dropped the very first unstressed syllable in the very first iamb, if that makes sense. I'm trying to think of an example where that could be trochaic. Mary had a dolphin. Now you have trochaic meter. The need for the comma after wandered. Oh, in Manju's example, because she's using lonely as a cloud to describe the phrase I wandered. So it was poetic license, I would call it. It's not necessarily so much of a need as it is a poetic use, I think, there of a comma. All right, we're going to move on, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and write them. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us, Katie. All right, now to talk about that trochaic meter, as Carrie was just saying, I know it's very confusing. Trochaic meter is a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. This is less common in picture books, which tend to end on a stress. Most lines end on a stress. Let me look at Shannon's, hi Shannon, example. How about this one? On the path to somewhere newer. It ends on an unstressed syllable. So most likely that would fit into an iambic manuscript. But as soon as I say that, there are exceptions here. This is one where it's hard to tell by just a single line. As a single line, because you can add, it is acceptable to add unstressed syllables where they wouldn't otherwise be. This could potentially be a trochaic sentence because you have on the path to somewhere newer. It's almost like you can just add that unstressed syllable at the end. So I think with that one, Shannon, honestly, it's really hard to tell whether that would be iambic or trochaic without seeing the rest of the poem, as opposed to Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow, which I know the rest of, so I know that that one's iambic. So I hope that that makes sense. Stressed, unstressed is your foot or your trochee. Once upon a midnight dreary. It's kind of like that on the path to somewhere newer. While I pondered weak and weary. The sun has set not long ago. The sun has set not long ago. I would say that those are iambs. Those aren't trochees because it's an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed. The sun has set not long ago. So there you have an iambic tetrameter. Whereas once upon a midnight dreary is stressed followed by unstressed. It gets even trickier though, like I said, when you break the rules. And Edgar Allan Poe absolutely does that in The Raven. For the rare and radiant maiden, so radiant can be pronounced Old English radiant, almost as two syllables, or radiant with the extra unstressed syllable, maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. So he's ending that on a stressed syllable and then goes into nameless here forevermore, where he ends on a stressed syllable again. So you really have to be able to look at each sentence within the context of the entire poem to determine whether it's considered to be trochaic or iambic sometimes. Oh, then yes, Rana, you're right on board. And that is a perfect iambic example. And Sandra Boynton is a favorite of mine too. I love everything that she writes. So that's where we are with trochaic meter. I did have this Now You Try, but this is a really tough one. If people would like to, feel free. I think On the Path to Somewhere Newer is pretty close to being an example of where I would say it's more likely to be a trochaic meter than it is an iambic meter. On the Path to Somewhere New is either way. That's probably going to be trochaic. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. If anybody wants to go ahead and type in, one of the takeaways that I really want people to understand is that meter is hard. Meter is subjective. So if you pay for, when I was very, very green, I paid for a scansion of my picture book from someone who was in the industry, and I disagreed with almost everything that she said, and she ripped it apart and was not. I'm surprised I kept going with the manuscript actually, because really she didn't like it at all, and some places she was absolutely right, and the meter needed to be fixed, but she was very heavy on looking at syllables, and that's not what meter's about. And because that's not what meter's about, because it's about stressed and unstressed beats, it makes it a whole lot trickier. And that's why sometimes you will find books on the shelves that break the rules and are still books on the shelves. It's because they know how to break the meter in a way that still works. All right, spondaic meter is 2 stressed beats in a row. So each foot is called a spondee, and it's stress, stress. This is the meter that you are not likely to find all the way through. I can't think of any poem in particular. If anybody else can think of one, let me know. Manju, you might know one, but I do not know one. I know of poems that I know Tennyson uses spondees sometimes. Shakespeare uses spondees frequently because the author is trying to make a point. So this is Troilus and Cressida, which I could be mispronouncing. It was written like so many of Shakespeare's plays in iambic pentameter, but he will use spondees for emphasis. So in this passage, he used it to highlight the news that the city of Troy is burning. So his goal was to introduce here a feeling of panic and alarm to the reader by giving you this stressed syllable, 2 in a row. Cry, cry. And then right after that, 2 more. Troy burns, or else let Helen go. So you hear how the iambs fall into place after those first 2 spondees. Cry, cry, Troy burns. Boom, it's in your face, you get it. The author has made their point by changing the meter. It's not just about the words. The meter is so important. Okay, anapestic meter. I'm going to spend the rest of my time really focusing on anapestic meter and talking about that. So ponder here and think about anapestic sentences in your head. Honestly, I think that in many ways, this is the easiest meter to understand. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's just in my crazy head. But this is an unstressed beat followed by 2 stressed beats. So sorry, I think that I actually had that written wrong. Let me come back here for just a second. Yeah, I did. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. So anapestic meter should be unstressed, followed by stressed. Please ignore what I wrote there. Unstressed, followed by stressed. So bump, 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 bump. Okay, that is Chris Van Dusen uses that. Andrea Beatty uses that. There are some wonderful, wonderful authors that frequently use that. I've used it in a couple manuscripts that I'm crossing my fingers on that I love because it's a really fun one. It's a really lyrical one to read. So we're going to look at, I love all of Chris Van Dusen's books, but If I Built a Car is one of my favorites. It's nothing at all like the car I have planned. Beautiful anapestic meter, just kind of rolls off your tongue there. And the beginning of the sentence is, Jack from the back seat said to his dad. Can you hear where he breaks the anapestic meter in that one? I'll give a second for you to write that one. Sorry about my errors on the slides, y'all. I wish I'd caught that. There are a couple places where he breaks the meter. I'll go with the easy one first and see if anybody can get the hard one. I'll bet, Carrie, you'll get it. Jack from the back seat said to his dad. He's dropped 2 unstressed syllables in the very first anapest. Bump, bump. Jack from the back seat said to his dad. So the first unstressed beat is extra. The very first beat in that sentence is stressed. Jack from the, so if it were a true anapest, and actually in the first one where I said follows the rules, it doesn't completely follow the rules. If that's your point there, Carrie, which it probably is. If he had said it is nothing at all, that would have followed it perfectly. It is nothing. It should have had 2 unstressed syllables there. It is nothing at all like the car. So I think that that's what you're saying. Where it breaks the rules, Jack, he automatically goes straight to the stressed beat. So he drops 2 unstressed. Yeah, from the first example, that's what I thought you were saying. So you're right. It should have 2 unstressed beats because it's an anapest, but he only has 1. So he's dropped 1 in that first one. And then in the second one, he's dropped both his unstressed syllables, but then as well, back seat. It could be argued that is 2 stressed syllables in a row, but regardless of whether you want to argue that, back seat, if you consider seat being an unstressed syllable, there's only 1 between back seat and said. So he is emphasizing back and said. Back seat, said. Okay, so in a true perfect anapestic meter, it would be back seat, he said. You would have 2 unstressed syllables there. So that's where he broke it. All right, anapestic meter number 2 example. Unstressed, stressed, stressed is what I wrote, and that is wrong. It is unstressed, unstressed, stressed. Bump, 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 bump. Where it follows the rules, when he built a great tower in only an hour with nothing but diapers and glue. When he built a great tower in only an hour with nothing but diapers and glue. Beautiful, perfect, 7 perfect anapests in one lovely sentence there. But where she starts at the very beginning, her opening sentence, I love this book too. Her opening sentence makes me crazy though, because she breaks the rules 4 times. So tell me if you can hear where she breaks the rules 4 times. Young Iggy Peck is an architect and has been since he was 2. Can you hear 4 rules that she broke in that one portion of a sentence? Young. So she starts on the stressed syllable there. So she's dropped both unstressed syllables, which is okay. That's one thing that she's done, which is okay from the very first foot. There's 3 more places that she breaks rules in that little clip. Has been since. So missing an unstressed syllable there as well. Has been since. So that's another place. Alyssa's on fire, y'all. Anybody else? I'll tell you, one of the rules is one that I'm not even talking about in here, but it is a cardinal rule break for children's book authors who write using rhyme. Architect, exactly, Carrie, that's she, architect. So we're missing another unstressed syllable in there. And the last one, Iggy Peck, does not rhyme with architect. So it's not a break of meter. She didn't rhyme. She didn't rhyme. That's she's got some assonance in there. You know, it's a similar vowel sound. She's got some consonants in there. That's beautiful. But peck and techt do not rhyme. So it can be done if you're Andrea Beatty. But for those of us who aren't Andrea Beatty, we should try to avoid doing that, especially in the opening sentence. This is such a well-written book, and it's clever in so many ways, and I love, love, love it. But she did break all kinds of rules in that first sentence. So I love using that one as an example of what to do. Yeah, is an architect, exactly. We're missing an unstressed syllable there too, Rana. Rana or Rona, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Final example here of anapestic meter. Again, unstressed, unstressed, stressed. Ignore my incorrect slide. This book, this is my favorite of Josh's books, but he breaks rules all over the place. So this is a really good book to sit down and tear apart to see what he got away with. And I haven't found a whole lot of books through Sterling where they let authors get away with some of the rhyming stuff that he gets away with. But it's such a clever story that I do think that there are some places where he got away with a little bit more. But he, by and large, when he breaks rules that are okay to break. He just breaks a lot of them. So again, love this book. It is a really, really fun book. So in the syrup is almost completely all gone. A single drop's left, just a drop, she went on. You can hear how that follows the rules. again, as Carrie pointed out in the last one, we have dropped an unstressed syllable from the very beginning, but by and large, we're following rules. The sirip is almost completely all gone. A single drops left, just a drop, she went on. He also drops an unstressed syllable between gone and a single. But again, it works really, really well. If he did that on purpose, it works really well because you have the exclamation point there, so it forces the reader to stop. It doesn't break the meter. It actually helps the musicality of the manuscript there, in my opinion, because he's used the exclamation point and it forces you to stop and take a breath where that other unstressed syllable would be. So if he had another unstressed syllable, you would almost feel like you were being rushed into a sentence and you wouldn't have a chance for the exclamation point and then the point he's trying to get across. Where he breaks the rules there, the last drop is mine, Lady Pancake conversed, but French Toast replied, not if I get there first. And you hear where he's breaking rules in that one. This is our last slide. Give it a second. I'll give you a hint. It's in the second sentence that or I guess it's the last sentence under that paragraph where I've written breaks rules. This is one of the reasons why people will tell you to have other people read your work out loud. If I gave this to my 10-year-old son or my 11-year-old daughter, they would have read, not if I get there first. They would not have read, not if I get there first. Not if I get there first. Not if I get there first is how they would have read it. And it is how they do read it when we've read it, when we've read the book together. Lady Pancake, Lady Pancake, exactly. So the way he's written it, he's expecting people to read lady as two unstressed syllables, but it's not, it's lady. So the stress naturally falls on the first syllable of the word lady. But because, again, he uses that word mine with the exclamation point, the last drop is mine, Lady Pancake conversed, it works. It works. It shouldn't work. He's definitely breaking a rule, but it does. It works in that sentence. I don't think not if I get there first works. I think that it's you're hoping that the reader reads it the way that you're wanting them to read it. But I think that one's pushing it a little too much. But Lady Pancake, even though yes, he's breaking the rules there, he can get away with it because of the way the sentence is written. So I think that my takeaways here. Oh yeah, does anybody want to try to write an ANAPESTIC sentence for me here? I forgot I had this one. And while I'm waiting, I had to read the not if I get there twice to get the beats right. So maybe that's a stress issue. Exactly. And you shouldn't ever have to go back and reread a sentence to get the beats right. You should, if you're reading it and it's work, then that's going to decrease the rereadability. That's going to make people not want to pick up the book and read it again. It's a book with a solid meter should be easy. It should be butter. It should be fun to read, and it should just be smooth, and everybody should read it the same way. You shouldn't ever be forcing a word to be pronounced in a way that you wouldn't pronounce it if you were using it in everyday conversation. And that is why, at least the way he wants us to read it. Exactly. So not if I are all stressed. Not if I. If that would actually be more like a not if I. So the not and the I would be stressed. Not if I get there first. If you were just saying that sentence and you didn't have it in the middle of Lady Pancake manuscript there, it would be not if I get there first. So that's how I would read it. It's but that's, I don't know that I would even have used those words. I think I probably would have tried to switch my words around to make sure that I was using words that can only be pronounced in one very particular way. Yeah, stress both French and toast. Same here. Same here. French toast. It makes it tricky. It makes it tricky. I think that because the story is so clever, that really carried him. But I can see a lot of editors giving pushback on this if a debut author were to bring it to them. And I know that this was his debut book as well. But he obviously had somebody who absolutely loved the story. It's such a good story. Obviously, I liked it well enough to buy it. Do some use? Yes, some authors do use italics to force a stress. That absolutely is a thing. Or uses some authors use bold. I did that, but when I submitted it, I did not. I made sure that it was pronounced the way that I wanted it to be pronounced without the italics. So you don't ever want to rely on italics and bold to twist your meter. If it's emphasizing a meter that's a little questionable, I think that that's probably more okay than using it to twist the meter into something that it wouldn't naturally be, if that makes sense. Same thing with bold. Bold and italics have both been used that way. It is one of the reasons, though, that I think as a rhyming author, I will ask my husband to read it to me. I actually don't force most of my manuscripts on him, but I will ask him to read out loud my rhyming manuscripts every single time to me. I'll ask my daughter to do it alone where nobody else is. I'll ask my son to do it alone where nobody else is. I'll usually ask a friend, my mother-in-law. I want to hear as many people as I can, and I'll revise it between each one so that I'm trying to get to a place where everybody reads it exactly the same way. The difference between rhythm and meter, that's a really great question. Meter, you have those 5 types of meter that are very specific, that are very defined, that are comprised of feet. Whereas rhythm is more the feel that you get from a manuscript, the feel that you get from a song. Meter is part of rhythm, if that makes sense. It can make something more rhythmic, but you can have onomatopoeia that adds a beautiful pop of rhythm to a prose manuscript here and there. Just as you can have a metric foot or a sentence that falls into a certain particular meter within a prose manuscript in order to make your manuscript more lyrical. So rhythm, I think, is a less defined term and is a more subjective thing, if that answers the question. You also have rhyme schemes, which you'll hear people talking about, which is talking specifically about the rhyme itself. So if you have 4 lines and the first 2 lines rhyme and the second 2 lines rhyme, then your rhyme scheme would be AABB. If you have 4 lines and the second and fourth rhyme, but the first and the third don't, then it would be ABCB. So that's your rhyme scheme, and you'll frequently hear people talk about rhyme schemes as well as meter. All right. Do I have any other questions, or does anybody want to throw an ANAPESTIC example out there into the world? I know it's a super complicated subject. It's one that I really like talking about because I think it is so subjective. Make sure if you're writing anything in verse or poetry, anything that is supposed to have rhyme in it, make sure if it has meter, you read it out loud. Yep, rhythm is about pace, meter first beats. Have others read it aloud to you so that you don't force a beat where it's not naturally intended to be, like interesting. can be pronounced interesting, but somebody may want interesting. It's not how it's pronounced to most of us when we are speaking. Same thing with every. Don't try to make a word something that you would not pronounced in a way that you wouldn't pronounce it normal speech. Don't try and switch your sentences up. If you wouldn't phrase something, you aren't Yoda, don't try and switch things around for the purpose of a rhyme. Let me see, was there anything? Other poetic devices, use them liberally. They're a lot of fun, and they can always make your manuscript sing beautifully too. So once you get the meter down, maybe sometime in the future we'll talk about other poetic devices. Books or resources I'd recommend to learn from. Alyssa, that's such a good question because I've read so many things. There is nothing out there that I have read and said, this is it. This is the success right here. But I do have a list of some things. So if you will find me on Twitter or shoot me an email, go to my website and shoot me an email, and I will compile that list and send it to you. Absolutely. I'm so happy that this was helpful to you, Judith. I'm grateful to everybody for joining me. If you have any questions about other things too, like alliteration or assonance or onomatopoeia or any of the other kinds of things that we talked about, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to help where I can. My email is shannonstocker@me.com, but you can reach me through my website, which is www.shannonstocker.com. And thanks for joining me through Stamola Live. Thank you to Erica for all of her hard work on making all of these webinars happen. Thank you to Allison, my fabulous agent, whom I adore. Query her if you aren't agented. She's wonderful. And thank you guys all for being here. I'm so appreciative. Mwah. Bye.